All right. Well, so we're actually going to be joined up here by Amanda and Lanier in just a few minutes. I'm going to start with the 90-day report. So last month was here with the 60-day report, so I'm happy to be here this month with the first 90 days transition report. So let me go ahead and get started. Last time I had a Gujarati word up here. The word was abar, which is grateful. This word is samudai, which is the word that means community and kind of like a reference to my people, right? And so I wanted to start with that, this idea of this broader kind of a community that's on our minds as adults right now. And referencing these kind of big ideas that are at the center of what we need to be thinking about. Like big ideas like democracy and our understanding of not taking that notion for granted of how we come together as a community. Our understanding of sustainability and our orientation toward climate change. This past weekend at OPRF, iGov hosted a roundtable with student leaders talking and leading the work, and so many exciting things happening. And related to both of those, our biggest fears and hopes are related to how we invest in young people and universal access to really learning and academic excellence and to building the capacity of young people to be the leaders of finding great solutions to our biggest questions. And so in that broader context, I am so honored to be here in this community of possibility. And I wanted to identify 3 places where I think that possibility is most visible. And some of this information I had shared during the Institute Day when we opened with staff. But one of the things is that Oak Park has this racial equity history. And so when we know about the institutionalized racism, the institutionalized racism that we know has happened in communities around us, and the fact that Oak Park has a history of institutionalized equity and an effort to design against that and to hold up the right values. Now, there's no reason to look at the past with rose-tinted glasses as if everything has been wonderful and perfect and that there were no, nuances around that. But it is important to name and state that that history exists here of people saying we want to uphold a set of values and design them into how we live together. That's important, and that's an exciting part of being here. And then I know I have this slide, but I've got to put it up again. But the more I learn about colleagues in all of these kind of sister agencies in Oak Park, the more impressed and excited I am about a shared vision around service and around some very high ideals around young people and what we're here to do together. And finally, here in District 97, Board Policy 712 provides really a guidepost for some act now actions that we need to take in order to make sure we're doing our part to make this an equitable and an excellent school district for every child. So with all of that is why I'm excited to be here. I know we have a lot of work to do on the board. We have talked about that the strategic plan of the district sunsets in 2022, the one that we currently have. And so I know that some of our future work is identifying what is that strategy compass and that map going forward. I deliberately didn't use the word plan here in terms of strategy plan or strategic plan, because I think that a plan can really only be built on terrain that you know. And I think that it's important to say that we are on new terrain. And so sometimes the best that we can have is a compass and a sense of the direction we want to go, and the rest we're going to need to figure out as we go through it. So I'd offer that as a thought in terms of, is it really a strategic plan? Or is it a naming of a compass and a mapping of our next steps as we go? And so some of the questions to think about is, what is our District 97 portrait of an 8th grade graduate? So what's that community's vision that every 8th grader that graduates from this district has this profile of skills and knowledge and aptitude and competency? There is a body of work around this idea of a portrait of a graduate that districts in the country and in Illinois are using to shape their vision, and I would like to ask and invite that we think about that frame in our work in terms of what's the future of the district. It's important to see that we're going to need some new ways of thinking in order to get to that vision, so that the ways that we currently function in schools, and I say this as a career educator for 30 years, it doesn't have the capacity in the way we understand schooling right now to do what we need to do. And so how do we need to check those assumptions and the biases about how the world is currently designed and how school systems are currently designed in order to get at this portrait of a graduate for the future? And related to that is that there needs to be new quantitative and qualitative ways to measure what matters to us. And so the metrics that we have, we need to keep using those. I would call those now metrics. But we also need to start talking about our next metrics. What are those things that really help us to understand whether or not in the ways in which we are achieving this big vision of a graduate? And I think at the bottom there, I put some questions because there may be some elements as we engage with the community around what is the community's vision for its children, that there are some elements that may be universal across all of the communities within the district. But there may be some that vary by community. I know each of the school communities, as I've been here at different block parties and Berry Fest, it seems like there's certainly things that are universal, but also unique kinds of cultures and claimings of identity by community, by race, and other dimensions of identity. So how might we think about that on the front end as we develop this new direction? So that's our future work, to talk about that, and that's a big and important. But I also want to, in this 90 days, we've actually started with some pretty concrete things. And so last time I provided a quick overview of the district priority work streams. And so what I'd like to do today is to go a little bit deeper into each one of those and where we are. So these are the 3 areas of work around which we have designed ourselves this year. 1, to be curious. 2nd, to be safe and healthy. And 3rd, to be a learning designer. So with each of these, I'll kind of break down with a little more detail what's happening underneath each of these priorities. So let's start with be curious. So under be curious, first is kind of 2 areas. What do we need to ask ourselves? What are some questions we need to ask ourselves around our own culture and how we function here? And what are some of the things that we need to do related to those? So let me give you an example. One of the questions we need to ask ourselves is, what is our culture now? What do we want it to be? And how might we co-create to bridge that gap? We determine the culture of the district by the choices we make and the commitments we make to each other. And so related to that, what might be some shared agreements and protocols for how we function together? Certainly we already have them, Robert's rules, but are there new protocols and new agreements that we need to form with each other? And then how are we going to really listen to each other, examine assumptions, and dialogue with each other with integrity? This is something that we need in our civic experience with each other, and we can start with how we function in the school district. And how might we be radically inclusive and participatory school district? So here, understanding that this means that we need to deliberately center voices and experiences that have always historically been on the periphery of the school district. And when we do that, we will create a better school district and a more inclusive school district that serves everyone. And really to create some new 2-way pathways for engagement and not to rely on the mainstream kind of pathways we've had. In the 60-day report, I mentioned that dilemma of, on the one hand, we do seek to be inclusive. On the other hand, if we stick with the avenues we have, then only people who know how to navigate it are being heard and are steering the direction of the district. We want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone, and that is a design challenge for us in terms of how we engage. So what to look for next, oops, let me go back one. So what to look for next is at the bottom there, we will be sharing draft agreements and protocols for staff and community feedback and revision. So look for that in the month of October, and opportunities to make sure everyone has a chance to weigh in and put your fingerprints on those discussions and decisions. So that's being curious. And then the second priority is be safe and healthy. So in this space, there are kind of 3 buckets of work: school, physical, and virtual safety, COVID mitigation, and student mental health and well-being. So in the first one, really those baseline safety expectations in terms of wearing our IDs, visitor protocols, making sure that when we have supervision going on outside, parents and others can tell because we've got vests on. We're actively supervising, connecting with students, using that time to, that's what we have, when we want to be physically safe, but when we do that well, we're also building relationships and aware of what's happening with our students. Related to school physical and virtual safety is incident response and communication. So this is a big body of work happening in all school districts, and we need to do that here. So how are we making sure that we are ready and clear and aligned and have common language should there be an emergency incident? As you know, we have a cross-functional planning team that's doing a fantastic job of making sure we're being aware of the, what other districts are doing in our area, staying in sync with our Oak Park Health Department, and really opening those lines of dialogue so that we are working in partnership to make sure we're balancing our responsibility to make sure that our schools are safe from a COVID standpoint, as well as all of the other things that we're trying to do as a school district. And finally, in this last bucket is really making sure that we have psychologically safe schools, using those PBIS Tier 1 practices. How are we making sure that schools are welcoming and attentive to the social, emotional health of our students, and really being engaging for them? And then when and if we have concerns, how are we using our highest level staff and trained staff to really be targeted and responsive and to support those situations? So a few things here. We have been collaborating with the village and other community agencies to really leverage expertise and to gain some efficiencies so that we can kind of provide optimum service. We are not experts in public health. We are not experts in safety and security. These are areas where there are sister agencies that have deep expertise, and we want to make sure that we are partnering strategically so that they can support us in those areas, and we can do what we're good at, which is teaching and learning and making sure that students have great relationships with our staff and are excited to come to school every day. So up next in this area, in October, we will be bringing forward a intergovernmental agreement with the Oak Park Police Department, as well as we're working with District 200 for the board's review as part of our school physical and virtual safety work. So in this third area, which is be a learning designer, this is our happy place in the school district. This is what we're here to do. And here we're kind of broken up into 3 bands by grade level. And in the first one, we really want to charge ourselves to make sure and ask ourselves, what does it look like for every early learning student in our district to be in love with literacy? So that they are really reading, writing, speaking, and listening at grade level by the time, before they get to 3rd grade. And what does that look like? For our 3rd through 5th grade students, we're asking ourselves for every student to have their own learning map and to know what's that next level of standard that I'm working on, mapped backwards from being ready for 6th grade. And then finally, for the middle school students, the same thing. What's that standards learning map? Mapped backwards from where I need to be in as a ninth grade student. That's student-owned learning. We really already know a lot about what this needs to look like. We know a lot about collective teacher efficacy, that when teachers come together to support each other's practice, that's the one thing that raises achievement like nothing else. Teachers sharing practice with each other. We know the framework for teaching, what effective teaching and learning looks like, and when you have distinguished practice, it is always student-owned practice, so we want to set that bar around our own practice in classrooms. And universal design for learning, and these principles that when we design around the students' experiences at the margins or the most unique learners and center their experience, we're going to create more pathways and lift the floor on core instructions. So even though we talk about teacher efficacy, I want to note that here in District 97, we want to challenge ourselves to think about employee efficacy. What is the ways in which we can leverage every single adult employed by the school district to support student learning goals? This is a missed opportunity in a lot of places. We have great teachers and we have great staff. How do we all row together in service of high levels of student learning every single day? And so we also want to think with an entrepreneurial mindset that really thinks innovatively about when students and families know what those learning maps are and what standards we're learning, then learning doesn't need to be contained within the school day. There are ways that we can leverage learning and standards mastery and learning outside of the school day. And that's when we can really start to do some exciting things and rethink how we do school. So up next, we're going to be collecting data at our October parent-teacher conferences, and that data, as well as other work, is going to inform how we make some family-centered changes in how we collaborate across school and home in the future for standards-based learning and competency-based learning and some entrepreneurial thinking. So that's what's next here. So that's kind of all the happy instructional stuff, but I also want to put up here that operational gaps and inventorying those has also been a continued area of work. So continue to identify and take immediate action on priority operational and compliance issues that have surfaced in the 90 days that I've been here. That has required kind of articulating and assigning tasks that need to be accomplished and ranking them, and then monitoring to make sure that we're getting those done. So we're doing a lot of systems building in different areas of our HR systems, our field trip systems, different things that have needed attention, and we're building up those systems. So there's still a lot of work to do to examine those critical issues in our district systems, kind of figure out how things are currently handled, and also where we need to build new processes and where we have the capacity to do that and where we don't, and bring proposals forward to the board to address those needs. Those are the things that are on my mind. I'll be back with the 120-day update on October 25th, and then the 15th, 13th, and hopefully by then really starting to get clarity on where we want to go with our next kind of strategic steps.